two. Just to see who he had come in.
If you would just go ahead and make sure you're on green.
Must be on green now.
I'm on green now.
Well, once we get done doing the pledge and the prayer, you'll start.
Hello, Jim.
Sorry, late.
We will start the June 29th meeting. It's a call council meeting to continue and handle the budget, adopting the budget. At this time, I would like to ask Ms. Nancy Brazil if she will do our invocation.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Lord, thank you for our life, health, and strength. Lord, we ask that you bless each one that are represented here today. Lord, we ask that you continue to be in the midst of the situation in our city, our town, our country, and our state. Lord, we ask that you just intervene as only as we know you can. Lord, we ask that you continue to bless us in a mighty way. Lord, that we will continue to do your will as you have elected us to do. Lord, that we continue to look to see what we can use our best judgment on what the city needs as the citizens need. Lord, we ask that you bless us and continue to strengthen us spiritually, physically, and mentally. Lord, this is my prayer in your Son Jesus' name I do pray. Amen.
Amen. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item on the agenda is a public hearing, and I will turn it over to Lisa and Stephen. I don't know if we have anybody signed up or wants to speak concerning. Nobody?
So normally in the past, when we've done the public hearing, I've talked a little bit about the budget in general, just for anybody who didn't hear it the first reading. And then got to follow my own rules sometimes. I forget about that. Normally when we have the public hearing on the budget, I give a small presentation just for the public about the budget, and then we allow the public to speak. We did have nobody sign up to provide comment tonight. What you will see is what I went over last month, which is just going over the whole budget, and I'll be very quick and broad on this since we talked about it last month. The budget that was presented to council for fiscal year 2021 totals about, general fund totals $15,162,452. This is a 1.6% increase over the previous year. Most of that is coming in some additional property taxes, but for the most part, we are pretty neutral with where we are on pace for revenues this year. As we've talked about before, this originally was higher based on our growth that we were seeing prior to COVID-19. This budget does take into account the unknown that we may see over the next several months or year for the COVID-19 impact on the budget. As we spoke about last month, there are no new positions currently funded in this budget. They were all removed as we looked to cut to make sure that the budget stayed relatively flat to be prepared for any downturn that may continue or may come again in the fall or winter if this COVID peaks back up and we see the cases cause closures or affect revenues. On the expenditure side, again, it's a balanced budget as required by law. It reflects 1.6% increase. Most of the increase is coming in the public works streets, which is where we're proposing financing a trash truck and dump truck, as well, and solid waste and recycling, where we had the new leaf truck or brush truck that was already taken care of, that was purchased this year. Also, you can see some increases in police. That's mostly due to cost of living adjustments being reflected and going up. And then you can see some of the departments are down, like general government, council, admin. Overall, it's pretty neutral for the year. Special revenue funds, these are everything that's not our general fund. I will point out that for the most part, we are considering these to remain pretty level, except for hospitality and accommodations tax. Those are the two that are most reflected, most affected by the COVID-19 impact, which is lack of tourism, and it was impacted by people going out to eat. Currently, restaurants are still at 50%, and are supposed to have guidelines in place to address that. What this reflects is about a 10%, actually it's about 12% decrease in our hospitality tax income for next year. As was mentioned last month, during the 07 through 09, 2010 time period when we saw the recession first come into place, we only saw about a 3% decrease overall in our hospitality tax during that time period before the number began to kick back up. So this is being very conservative based on that as a guideline. Also showing accommodations and local accommodations dropping by about 25 to 30%. Based on what we're seeing so far to date, that's pretty in line. What we'll keep a track on that is to see what happens in the fall with Clemson Athletics. How that goes will determine what our accommodations tax numbers look like moving forward into the next fiscal year. And then the last one is our enterprise and debt service funds. Our enterprise fund is our stormwater. This does reflect a $2 increase per year in our stormwater fees that will go to help pay for the bond that we'll be talking about tonight, that we approved the council approved for first reading last month, to take on that debt to do a lot of projects, including South Second, Dogwood, and a lot of other projects that we will talk about later that are failing around the city. And then our debt service funds is our tax increment fund, and it's pretty much staying the same as we have seen. The only difference you're seeing there in the decrease for the revenue is we are recognizing that what you see there is what we actually can expend on bond and other projects, because not all entities agreed to fund at 100%. We had been including all the revenue and then showing it as an expense. This will just show our net revenue after we transfer those funds back to to the school district and county that they're owed. And I can answer any questions that council may have. I know we have it on the agenda for second reading, and there's some discussion that will take place there. This was mostly just for public in case there was any comments that came. And if not, I'd leave it up to Mayor if he wants to close the public hearing and move forward.
And I think council will have the opportunity to speak during the budget is talked about. Right now, I'd like to move to ordinance number 2020, which is an extension to the ordinance we had passed previously, so we could have these emergency meetings. That was done in March 13th, 2020. Right now, with the situation we do have one council person that is viewing online, which is Brian Garrison. We could have had more absent, thank goodness we didn't. So right now, I'd like to ask for a motion to bring that to the floor.
Motion, bring it forward.
Second.
And I'll let you explain the rest of it.
The mayor hit very well on that. The only thing I will add is that our first one that we adopted, it ran 60 days. So it actually expired the day after our last council meeting. We're allowed to extend this for up to 6 months, so we can do 2 more of these for emergency meeting guidelines. if we do not adopt it, then should somebody have to be out for a COVID-related illness or another incident, their comments and vote would not count if they were to come virtually into the meeting. For their comments and votes to count, we have to adopt this emergency ordinance to allow council to participate either through telephone or virtually through app.
Question?
Call for the question.
I understand.
Call for the question. All in favor of that ordinance, raise your right hand. Aye. And Brian Garrison is a yes also. All in favor. Number 6, under unfinished business, this is second ordinances. Ordinance number 2020-15, authorizing the lease of 130 Esther Drive for 1 year. Hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Bring it to the floor, and I think
Again, I'll be quick on this one. We talked about it last month. We did purchase the property at Esther Drive back. Council approved second reading in February. Council at that point in time approved us to rent to the previous homeowner. They have since found another home and relocated. They moved in May. For a city to be able to rent property, to lease it, we have to have it approved by ordinance by council. The goal would be to continue to rent it with preference being given to city employees, and we would plan to do so for 1 year. As we talked about last meeting, we are currently renovating and adding on to Station 1, and we didn't feel now was the opportune time to go and try to sell a property when we were in the middle of construction. So the goal would be to lease it for this year and then turn around after the year is up and put it on the market and sell it once the construction is complete.
Was this after our piece that we wanted, a piece of land was taken away from?
It has already been surveyed, and we combined all 3 properties over there into one piece of property from where we bought the corner of Esther and the portion of this property.
it has already been registered with the courthouse like it is now, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. I think it was recorded about a month ago.
Month and a half ago, it was correct, and they're finishing up the floors on it as we speak.
Call for the question, okay?
Okay, call for the question. All in favor of this ordinance, raise your right hand.
Aye.
Brian is yes. Thank you. Ordinance number 2020-16, providing of the issuance of the sale not to exceed $800,000 for some stormwater work. I'll ask for a motion.
I so move.
Table.
Kent, second.
Second.
Okay. All right, yeah.
So as we talked about, we went through some examples last month. Here you'll see a couple in Huntington North. And you can see the corrugated metal pipe that's beginning to rust and deteriorate, as well as systems that were designed 40, 50 years ago that are being oversized, that are undersized for capacity. You can see on the right where we have pipe that is starting to separate. It's not supposed to bend like that. What it is there's separation occurring, and it will create voids that will eventually undermine roads. So what this would be used for is to repair and renovate a lot of these projects. We have identified, I want to say it's about 18 projects that need to be complete. Not saying these funds will get us through all of them, but the goal is to get them as far as possible with these funds so that we can stop being so reactive on a lot of the issues. Right now, it's actually failing before we go out to have to fix it. So we're trying to get ahead to the point where we can get these projects complete so that when we go out and do projects in the future, we're actually fixing problems that have not failed at that point in time. We did ask for over $700,000 in C funds from the county to fix stormwater issues on South 2nd and Dogwood. We only received about $295,000 of those funds. So we are reevaluating those projects, and we'll be moving forward with trying to get an engineer on that. We did meet with the school district today because they are impacted with the one on South Second to see if there's any source of funds or ability they may have to assist with these projects. And also work with us to make sure that when it's installed, it's not all of a sudden impacting Getty's Middle School over there and their stormwater system. Should council approve, the bond is here. So BB&T was the lowest bidder on it. It was at 1.85% interest for the bond. It would be a $790,000 10-year bond. And it's described as a wraparound bond because, as you can see, there's two debts that we currently have with stormwater. On the left, you'll see the 2020 payments that we would have. This would be the new bond. In the middle, you'll see the 2016 bond payments that we are making. And then on the right, you'll see the total bond payment. So what you will notice is for the first 6 years, the 2020 payment is between about $65,000 and $70,000. While the 2016 bond is at $50,000. Once the 2016 bond is paid off for those last 4 years, all of the money will go to help pay for the new bond and help pay it off. So by doing this way, where we push off the largest payments to the end, we're able to keep our payments level for the whole 10 years and finance a little more money than we could have if we tried to keep our payments the same for all 10 years. Very similar to what we did for the hospitality bond a couple years ago, while we still had one that had 2 more payments left on our current hospitality bond. So as you can see, it will keep our payment pretty much around $120,000 for the life of the bond. And should council approve tonight, we have planning lined up, or closing lined up for the Monday after the 4th of July.
Mr. Steve, do we have any debt that's anywhere near being paid off where it would help us on these payments?
It would not on the stormwater because you can only pledge stormwater funds against stormwater bonds. These are actually considered special revenue bonds. And because this is a special revenue account, you can only pledge those revenues against these bonds. This does not use our taxing authority as the city to pledge, to secure these funds. This is actually securing the revenues from the stormwater fees to use this, so you can't use other sources of funds to obligate those.
I understand, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. We gonna, we need an amendment.
For the stormwater bond?
Yes.
Not on this?
Trustee.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. We do need an amendment. I believe Lisa had it on there to remove item B underneath the stormwater ordinance, or to just adopt the ordinance that you currently have and to amend to the ordinance you currently have in front of you, because we did remove the fact that they would sit in escrow, which means that they would be held in a separate bank until we needed to draw the funds down. They were good with allowing us to keep those funds in a separate bank account in our bank, so we don't have to go through the process of drawing those funds down from escrow.
And I think the wording in there says trustee.
You're right.
So
They
that
would
has
serve
to
as a
be-
trustee.
we don't have a trustee. So I'll need that as a motion amended. Yes. Hold on a second. Yes, sir.
Stephen, may I ask, we asked for $700,000 or so from C funds from the county, and, we only received $295. How do you propose we make that difference up with all the projects we have listed?
So we don't know that we can make that up without using some of the bond funds, but the first step in that is to get an engineer on board. So we're working on the RFP. I'm working on that today to get that out so that we can get an engineer hired to help design these projects and give us some options. And once we actually go up to bid to see what the pricing is, we won't know how much we have to make up. The other thing is we will look at other options. For example, on Dogwood, as we've mentioned before, The most expensive option is to repair it and put it back as it currently is with the road running through. The option may be cheaper to daylight the pipe that runs underneath there and open it up and not open that road back up, not put it back in place. That could save a couple $100,000 of road construction. So there are several options we'll look at throughout each of these to try to reduce the cost down. And we also have our road funds that can use to be paved roads that can also be used for stormwater and road maintenance to go along with this that we get from the county. So we have also those funds that we can look at to help with the paving or the repair of the roads to put back in place as well. So we'll be trying to look at a group of funds and options to try to get those within a budget that we can work with and that council is good with.
Can we reapply at a future time for C funds?
Not this fiscal year. They have the funds that they get per year, and once those funds are obligated, we have to wait till they get more funds, which would be next fiscal year. The thing we can do is go back and try to see if there's any other funds that they might have that they could work with.
Can we reapply next year?
We can, but once the project's complete, we can't ask for the funds for reimbursement. So if we wait and reapply next year, the project won't be complete, won't start for another year.
We'll have to
Okay,
go for
I
another
understand.
project.
Right. So, we'll come back with options. Like I said, we went out and got an estimate for construction that we used to go and get the apply for the C funds. Until we actually go out to bid and we see what the pricing comes back in, we won't know how far those funds will go. So until we get to that step, we won't know what gap we have to make up. And we'll be prepared to work for options at that point in time and come back to council as needed.
Okay, I understand.
I would like to propose an amendment to this ordinance to remove the word trustee. Because we are not going to use the trustee in this new financing opportunity that we have. So we no longer need the trustee. So I would like to propose that amendment to remove trustee.
Okay, we have a motion on that. And a second?
Second.
Second. Everybody understand that? What she's asking to change?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. All in favor of that? Raise your right hand.
Someone call the question, Mayor.
Oh, sorry about that.
I
I call for the question.
Call for a question.
Did Brian vote for the amendment?
He's voting now. That's what he forgot. I forgot to call. Call for a question. He did that. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Yeah.
Brian Jack. Now we'll move on to the ordinance itself.
I'll call the question, Mayor.
Call for a question for the ordinance.
Okay.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed?
Yes.
Right says yes. Okay. Paperwork next. Ordinance number 2020-17, authorize the conveyance of property located at Brookview Circle by quitclaim deed. Ask for a motion.
Motion, bring it to table discussion.
Second.
Second. I'll turn it over to Steve.
So as we discussed last month and previously when we did the memorandum of understanding with them, or development agreement, I apologize. So STP Development is looking to build, I think it's about 116 single-family homes off of Pearson Road. The development property is shown here. We own a right-of-way at the end of Walnut Hill Drive, and we also own property on the kind of southwest or western portion of Brookview Circle that backs up to Brushy Creek. The property that we own on Brookview Circle is one that they have asked for the city to quit claim to them so that they can make a connection for sewer, to combine utility sewer line for the development. In turn, for these two right-of-ways, They will be working with us to define and deed a portion of their property over to us along Brushy Creek so that we can extend the Brushy Creek Greenway along their property and tie it into several subdivisions around there, and future potential developments that may occur around that property as well. We are not ready for this yet, and they are also not asking for the right-of-way on Walnut Hill yet. They are first only asking for the Brookview Circle so they can go ahead and line up and design for their sewer connection with combined utilities.
Call for the question.
Any questions? No questions? Everybody fine? Call for the question.
Please.
All in favor of this ordinance, raise your right hand. Brian's yes. Ordinance number 2020-18 to provide the adoption of the city operating budget for fiscal year July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. Need a motion?
I move that we bring before the council for discussion.
Motion,
Second.
second. On the floor.
Mayor Womack, I will offer an amendment to the budget to include a training officer for the police department that I think was in the original proposal. I would make that motion to amend.
Well,
Also-
motion, yeah. Second,
Second.
second. Any discussion?
Well, I think this is something we really need, and particularly with the sensitive times in which we're living, I think if we can make our police force even more professional, I'll be very pleased with that.
I agree with you, Ms. Webb, and I commend the chief for making sure that we do this in a proper manner, and I guess my only caveat is the implementation of it, that we make sure that we bring the right person in to train correctly and with the latest police initiatives that can help us with our civil unrest. So I commend you, Chief Tollison, and the police department for doing such a good job for so long.
And as chairperson of the police department, I also want to thank Chief Tollison because he and I have met and he's done a wonderful job, and we want that to continue because he has good trust in his officers and knowing that they will do well, and he seems to know who they are and what they can do. So, and we appreciate that for the city of Easley.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to bring up the fact, too, that a motion's been made to do this, to put on this officer. But I think some discussion has been made that we don't do this till January 1 of 2021.
I'll make this up to the person making the motion has to put that in.
Stephen, forgive me if I'm wrong, but Stephen has some information that we can actually go into, that we can do this training officer as of this moment, once he presents to us the information that he has.
So I can go through. I wanted to kind of finish. I know there may be other motions that are made to amend the budget. I do have some options to show how we would fund those positions with, because even if council wants to add the position in, whichever positions they want to add in, we will have to do some small amendments to the budget to account for some additional revenue and expenditures prior to adoption to handle the costs and the revenues for those positions. So I can show those options, but I'm waiting through the motions if council wanted to go and do that, or I can go ahead and go through it now if you want to.
It's up to y'all. I mean,
Do you want to hear both motions or just the one? Because I
we'll
think,
have to vote on this
okay,
one first.
that's fine.
So what I'll go ahead and go through it real quick, and then I know there have been committee meetings by both the police and fire on a training officer, and I've shown options for either or if council decides to move forward with only one of the positions or both of the positions. So what you have here is our budget that was as proposed on the left, which shows the balanced budget that was presented at the public hearing and last month as well. If you go to the far right in the blue for the police, you will see that if we do add if council does move forward with adding a training officer position in, based on what that cost does to the budget, there's a recommendation that we put $50,000 on the very bottom. You can see budgeted use of fund balance is to use $50,000 of fund balance to go to offset the purchase of SCBA equipment for the fire department. There's $125,000 budgeted in there for capital, for the purchase of SCBA equipment for the fire department. As you've heard, you may have heard me say before, if you or not, I don't like the idea of using fund balance to pay for reoccurring costs, which would be what positions are. I believe fund balance should be used more to handle one-time expenses. That's just one of my personal preferences in budgeting. So what you're seeing is me putting some of the fund balance in for one-time purchases that will then free up those funds that were put in there to be used for the reoccurring cost of the positions. So if, I know the fire committee met as well, and there was discussion about a potential for a fire training officer as well. If both positions would be approved, then what I would recommend is all $125,000 that was put in for SCBAs would come from fund balance, and then we would use that to offset both those positions within the budget. The reason it's less for the fire or for the police than it would be if both were put in is because traditionally the police department has turnover higher. They have 53 officers, so when they have turnover throughout the year, they have lapsed salaries that build. And over the last 4 or 5 years, they've shown that there would be enough money to make up the remainder of that difference to cover that position. On average, the last 4 or 5 years, they've had lapsed salaries in the range of about $75,000 to $80,000 on average. And that's just from turnover that takes place and the time it takes to replace that officer. So they do have those funds that can help offset their cost. Fire department is a little different. They normally don't lose officers. When they do, it's very rarely, and it's usually one at a time. We actually had a unique situation this year where they had 2 or 3 gone at one time. So they normally don't have the lapsed salaries there that would help make up some of theirs. So that's why we could do one, it would only be 50, but to do both, we would need the full 125 because we would have to make up almost the full position for the fire, but we would only need part of the position for the police. I hope that made sense. I can answer any questions that you may have. So you would have 2 options should you approve the positions. If there's just one, you would have one option that we would need to amend the budget to make it work. If you do both, you'd have another option that we would use. But they would both be able to be funded as of July 1st, 2020, based on these options.
I think it'd be appropriate to vote on each amendment as they come up. I supported this amendment or this proposal in the police or law enforcement committee meeting. I supported it, but as much as anything, I wanted the full council to vote on this matter. So that's why I was in favor of it at that point, to get all of us to vote as a full body. I think it is certainly a timely request and a needed request, a worthy request. My concern was about the effect on the budget, and Mr. Steese has addressed that for us. I think Chief Tollison is prepared to go into more detail on this, but with everything that is going on in the law enforcement area, with all the unrest in the country, I think this is a very timely request and a very worthy request.
Call for the question.
Call for the question. All in favor of this amendment for the police training officer, raise your right hand. Ron J. Okay. Thank you.
All right, as chairperson for the fire department, I'd like to make a motion that we amend the budget for similar reasons that to put on a new training officer.
And I second that.
We had a meeting just like this, Mayor, and the fire department, like I said, has very little turnover. They had requested more men, more equipment, everything because of this virus. We could not give them any of that. But as I talked with the chief, the men we got, we want to give them the best training we can possibly give them, where we can get 100% out of each one of those men. And this was a way of doing it, getting a training officer, getting all the performance where these men can be trained in every field. They can fill in for each other. And we also had myself, I think it was Mr. Robinson and Ms. Brazil had a meeting. And we voted to send it to the full council and let the full council make this decision. But my thought, like Mr. Robinson said, was yes, it's something that's needed for the training, but like I say, we wanted to pass it on and let the full council make this decision.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Call for the question.
Well,
somebody else needs to call for the question.
Call for question.
Well, excuse me, I think this is a worthy request as well. I think a distinction could be made between the demands that are being placed on law enforcement today versus demands that are being placed on the fire department today. And both worthy requests. My concern on each of those would be the effect on the budget. But I see a distinction between the fire department and the police department in view of the demands, the crisis, and all of the unrest that we have being made on law enforcement officials today.
I absolutely agree with every word he said. But then again, the way Easley has been growing, we just have approved like 300 more homes. Our fire department is going to need this to cover this area, or we're going to be behind. So we need that training where these men can perform the best they can perform without having to spend more money to hire more personnel at this time. So with the way we're growing, the more houses been built and been applied for, we need this training badly. We're going to fall way behind to start with.
Well, if I might chime in, I think that having a qualified fire district firefighting ability is as important as having an adequate police force. They work hand in hand. I think it's going to enhance our whole community if we are better able to handle the crises that come at us. And it is many of the times the crises involve both agencies. So budgeting is my worst area. I don't have that background. If Stephen says we can find enough money to do it, I'm gonna say, let's do it.
I think the chief said he would forego some of his pay.
Which chief?
No, we need it.
So the one comment I would make related to the budget is I want to make sure you understand we're not finding any new money. We're using fund balance, and we do have, after what's obligated for the operations and maintenance and public works facility, operations and maintenance and fire station, about $3.6 million in fund balance. So we would be using about $125,000 of that in this year's budget to offset the SCBA equipment so that we could use the funds for that. But it's not any new funds that we're finding. This is funds that we've saved over the years, additional revenue.
Very good. Very good.
I'll call a question. Oh, you have a question.
Any more comment? No?
I'll call for the question.
Have a call for the question. All in favor of that amendment, raise your right hand. Yay. Brian said yay, so we're good. Okay, so now we'll get back to the,
Opposed?
I'm sorry, opposed? Opposed? Okay. So we'll get back to the budget part now.
Correct. I think Chief wanted to say something, then I'll go over what we would need to do to amend the budget prior to adoption.
Well, I think that's what I kind of wanted to touch on as well. Thank everyone for your thoughts on that, and thanks on the amendments. My question would be, even though you're going to plan on a fund balance purchase that would put an extra $50,000 in the police side and then extra in the fire department side, if it is not needed, then it's a good thing.
Correct. Anytime fund balance is budgeted, we've budgeted fund balance twice since I've been here, and we've yet have to actually have used it. We've been able to make that money up the funds up through the year. Should it not be needed, yes, we would not have to dip in fund balance. And the same side of that, should the police not have the turnover that they've had in the past and that lapsed salaries is not there, we might have to come back and amend the budget mid-year to make up for that as well. So we'll just have to continue to monitor it throughout the
Yes,
year.
and, I mean, I can pretty much about guarantee that I can absorb it in the budget as is on our position. As a little, I regret to say that due to everything that's going on in the community, I'm not attributing it to it 100%, but I have had 2 officers resign this week. So we're going to need people to be trained, we're going to need help, but that also frees up 2 positions until I get those filled. So we're already starting on the savings where I probably wouldn't even need the $50,000 at the end of the year.
So as council has approved both those positions, as we go to adopt the budget, we need to make sure that the budget reflects that. So what you're seeing in the green up there would be what council would actually approve as part of the budget that you adopt. So the budget ordinance you have in front of you just shows the total revenue and total expenses. It's very limited in what goes into the budget ordinance under state law. So really, you would only be amending your budget to increase your general fund revenues and expenses to that top number, that $15,287,452. The rest of that is shown is the line items that would be part of what we would put into the budget internally to handle the budget day to day. Brian, I don't think they would need to amend that portion, would they? Yes, I think you would just need to amend your budget ordinance to list the new revenue and expense number of $15,287,452, because you've already added the 2 positions, so you don't need to make any more amendments on that. You just need to cover the cost.
So we need to make an amendment now on that?
Yes, sir.
I do make an amendment that we change that to go with the top number to add that to it, to our budget.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
I'll call for the question on that.
Call for the question. All in favor of that amendment, raise your right hand. Brian? Yes.
And
Anybody opposed?
then now you would just approve the budget as amended.
I move that we approve the budget as amended.
I second.
Call for the question.
Call for question.
All right.
So
All
make
in
the motion.
favor, raise your right hand. Yes. Anybody opposed? Thank y'all. That was complicated.
Put a good one there.
Thank y'all for making it complicated.
First time I've had to deal with it.
Ordinance number 2020-19 to amend the City of Easley zoning ordinance. Ask for a motion.
I so
Motion.
move.
Second.
Second.
So as we talked about last month, I'll go through the pictures again just to show why this is really being asked to be amended to have the administrative review. These are a couple examples of where fences have been installed or amended after installation within stormwater right-of-ways. You can see that there's actually a board over that pipe, and they've put the fence down where the culvert's supposed to drain to. Same thing in the top right, the bottom right, you can see they put one within the stormwater easement, which actually created a small little pond in their backyard when it rained very hard. Same thing here, chain link fences that are connected within the easements that have led to kind of a check dam with leaves being created, which then pushes water back where it does not belong. So what was added in there, and there was a request to have it reviewed, and I did send it out for council to review, is to, we added in that the review should be completed within 3 business days. That was a comment that came out to make sure it was done. I think we've been able to get everyone that's come in the interim within the same day or the next day. So I think we should be able to meet the 3 business days just fine. And then we did also amend item number 7 to change it to yard landscaping or improvements that requiring grading or construction of a greenhouse. That way, if they're changing the elevation or grading the land, they do have to have an administrative review. Sorry, I don't know, it keeps cutting in and out, I apologize. So should council approve tonight, it would go into effect, and we would set up the administrative review. And we've actually already begun the process internally. This would just formalize it.
Do we need an amendment to handle those changes?
You do not. What you have in front of you reflects these changes. So if what you adopt tonight would be the ordinance that reflects these changes already in there.
The amendments were proposed last time.
Right.
At first reading, and this is second reading.
Can you make a motion to amend this ordinance?
No, sir. You would just be, if you decide to approve it, the amendments have already, so you can make a change for wording like that based on discussion between first and second reading, and what you get at second reading reflects those minor changes. The difference between it and the stormwater is they require an amendment to remove and add things like that in there, because you're actually taking out a major aspect of it. This is just reflecting council's discussion at the last meeting, so there were more grammatical changes than anything. So you don't need to amend this one so much as when you vote to approve, you will be adopting it as it's written tonight, which reflects these changes.
Call for the question.
One moment. Ms. Webb, you had some concerns about this ordinance last time?
Yes, sir, and that's reflected in Section 7 under uses customary. We had flowers, planting of flowers and flower gardens, and I asked that it be changed to anything that required grading, not just planting posies.
And on item number 4, pet house, if I want to put a little house for my doggie in my backyard, I've got to get a permit for that?
That is for kennels used for commercial purposes. Or no, that's actually prohibited. So yeah, technically that was,
But
Wouldn't necessarily be issued a permit as you would just approval to be reviewed. And again, when we're talking about a house this big that can be picked up and moved
But
versus a
you're
bigger
looking
house.
more at on the property line.
it is
That's-
so that
that's
it will
what they're
not be within that drainage easement. There's a 5-foot drainage and a utility easement on the side of each property line. And the placement of a kennel like that
In a
might
modern day subdivision?
be, yeah, well,
most of our older ones have them as
yes.
well. We're finding out like, we can pull back, and some of your divisions that were subdivisions built in the 50s, 60s, 70s had that as there as well.
Yes.
I think it's going to be a challenge to educate the public and inform the public they've got to get permission to put a doggy house in their backyard.
Even a fence, absolutely correct.
And we're hoping to use homeowners associations. Chase actually started a Nextdoor account, which is for the city, so we can put information out on the Nextdoor from the city of Easley to push this information out and stuff like that, so that we can try to reach as many people as possible. and let them help spread the word. As we found out with the recycling, only so many people follow social media. Once we stopped picking up the cans and people started calling in, the word got around a lot quicker than it did through social media. So we want to try to get as much information out directly to the people.
We're working with one issue in my ward where the fence is going right down the property line, and we're having trouble with water backing up from the upstream neighbors. And it's not all the fence, but it's majority of it is the fence. So fences are problematic. They create small dams.
And I would say if you feel Pat House is something that doesn't belong there, we can amend that tonight to remove it.
I don't have a dog.
You don't have a dog in the fight.
I don't have a dog down there.
So you're not living in a doghouse, right?
Not yet.
Any other discussion?
Call for the question.
All right, call for the question. All in favor of that ordinance, raise your right hand. All in favor, anybody opposed? Thank y'all, and I appreciate everybody being here tonight. You can't go anywhere right now, it's raining anyway, right? Unless you want to use an umbrella. But I do want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July and let you know that we are, I know most of you already know, we are doing the fireworks. And believe it or not, we're shooting the fireworks because they already paid for, and then we're encouraging everyone to do social distancing. The police department will be shutting down Main Street from Pendleton down to South First, correct? So everybody can come and enjoy them. They'll be shooting them at 9:30. So with that, what I would like to do is open the floor up for discussion of anyone that would like to wish everybody a 4th of July or talk about anything else. So I'd like to, yes, sir.
Right quick, Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Steve's mentioned recycling. I've used the new recycling center a couple of times, and it worked great.
Great, good, thank you.
Remember on our trains that we got around town for people to follow around and learn around the city, down beside Rosa Beauty Salon, came up through there and noticed the train had been fried from the concrete. There's epoxy or something on it. It's been fried and it's been bent in 2 ways. Some people think the lawnmower may have hit it, but the lawnmower wasn't bent in 2 ways and fried the end of it up. So somebody had vandalized that, so I gave it to Chase and hopefully he can get it replaced.
Darn.
I super glued it back.
Do that for this pure vandalism.
Pure meanness.
Yes, sir, you say something.
Know that today, if you text 474747, that is the City of Easley's text line. And if you text the word Easley, you will get information on what we are doing for the 4th of July. Those keywords will change throughout when we have events. The day of the 4th of July event, if they text firework, they will get some information from DHEC on how to social distance, because some people still don't know how to do that. So
How you do that with a rotary phone?
with a rotary phone, you just give up and stay home. But yeah, well, anyway. So yeah. So anyway, we did this morning meet about the 4th of July, what's going to be blocked and everything, and I will send y'all some more information, council, on what we talked about this morning. I'll send that in the next couple of days to you guys as well, so y'all are informed. That's all I have.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to call on Mr. Brian Garrison for one.
Yes, thank you.
I'll hear him.
I agree with, I'm sorry, can I speak?
Yep, go ahead, yes, sir.
Happy 4th of July to everyone. I know I believe the other council members have received a couple of emails, several emails, in regards to council passing an ordinance to wear masks. And I know some other cities across the state have done that. I thought this was an appropriate time to bring that up. I'm sure probably some of the other council members have some comments and thoughts about this. I'm a bit torn. I know from a public health standpoint, it's a very important thing. I wear one every day, all day, when I'm at my office. But my feeling is mandating that our citizens wear that is another issue. And I'm somewhat hesitant to go down that road right now. Things can change, I understand that, but that's kind of my opinion now. I've received 3 emails who have encouraged us at the city to pass an ordinance requiring people to wear masks. I actually received 2 phone calls today from residents, one a business owner, the second an elected official representing Easley from another governing body, opposing the city from mandating wearing masks. As a business owner myself, and I'd like to give just a short perspective from what I'm doing. When this thing started, we shut down our retail store. We've gradually, well, we really haven't opened it back up. We occasionally have one person come in at a time. As a business owner, I'm requiring anyone that comes into my store to wear a mask, and I think that's each business owner's prerogative to do that. My wife and I wear a mask and gloves, as I said earlier, every day, all day, as we, we have a compromised patient and customer population, so we do that as their, on pause, can you still hear me? As a precaution to them and to us. So that's just my thoughts. I thought I'd bring that up now because I know there were some emails out there. I'm sorry to drag on, but thank you.
No, thank you.
No.
Thank you. Ward 2, Mr. Dyke.
Well, I have similar thoughts. As many of you know, I just got back from an Appalachian trail hike in Connecticut, and I did not wear my mask on the trail, nor did I see anybody else wearing a mask on the trail. But when I got off the trail and when I went into the communities in Connecticut, and let me preface this by saying Connecticut is a hotbed of the coronavirus at this time. And I rarely saw anyone without a mask when there were signs and there were people there. If you went into a retail establishment, you had to wear a mask, as well as the people inside that retail establishment. I went into a grocery store where they took my temperature, and I was wearing my mask, and they issued me a pair of disposable gloves. So everybody in that grocery store was wearing a mask and gloves. So they're very serious about it up in Connecticut. Coming back through the states of New York and especially in Virginia, saw the same thing, a much more intense scrutiny on people wearing masks and protecting each other, not only retail, but at gas stations too was a good example, that you had to be wearing a mask. And my suggestion, Mayor, is that we form a committee, and between now and 2 weeks before our next meeting, let's come up with a proposal a proposal for an ordinance or resolution, at the very minimum, a resolution addressing this virus. I don't want to get us in the position of playing catch-up and waiting till we become the hotbed down here. I think we need to be very proactive on this whole issue, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm also very concerned with wearing a mask, and after having spent a week in our own quarantine till we found out our test results, I really respect the need for the mask. But before I could vote for anything, I'd want to know what impact that has on our law enforcement. What impact does it have on paying fines? Are we going to impose fines? I'd have to see how it was written before I could vote in favor of something like that. I regret having to put a burden on a police officer. I don't like the idea of someone in the Ingalls having to call a police officer. That hurts me internally. I think any store could have its own policy and enforce that. If they can't enforce it, then what happens? So I have a lot of questions that need to be answered before we pass that ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
How would you enforce it? How much would you fine them?
Well, that would be up to the ordinance that we pass, yeah.
And if you, probably if you check the majority of people, more people, citizens don't want it than want it.
There will be exceptions. There will be people who have asthma who say they absolutely cannot wear a mask. And how do we define those people? And this is a sensitive time period. I don't want to have enforcement put in a position where things could get out of hand.
So like myself, I have congestive heart failure. I cannot hardly pull air through those masks. But if I do get the virus, I'm more likely dead up.
So you need it. I wear mine.
Ms. Nancy?
Well, I'm about on the same way as Ms. Pat. I think it should be enforced because I do believe it works. But I don't want to actually put the burden on the police force that, like she said, somebody calls her and say, well, you know, that we have somebody that doesn't have a mask on. But if we get into what we're going to require and what we're going to do to present this ordinance or resolution or whatever, I think it'll be a good thing for all of us because I'm like Kent, we don't want this thing to get out of hand where we become the hot spot, which I think we're probably not that far from it, but you know, we don't want it to get any more out of hand than what it already is.
I agree.
Our state is known as a hot spot. The southern belt right now is a hot spot.
Mr. Robinson?
I thought you were gonna call on Lisa. I would like to have a philosophical debate with my late father about the proper role of government in telling people what to do in, you know, this type of part of their life. Be an interesting discussion, and certainly we all should. I don't always agree with Governor McMaster with what he says and does, but he said, look, people, we can't have an epidemiologist, a police officer, and a mama and a daddy following everybody around all the time, telling them what to do. You know what to do, wear a mask. And I kind of like that approach. I'm torn on this topic.
Well, of course, I had already thought about it and asked some questions prior to the meeting, and so what I would like to do is, with some of the suggestions that Mr. Steese and myself talked about, Kent mentioned, is I'd like to put a committee together. I would like Ms. Pat Webb to be, since she was so interested there, to be the chairperson for that committee. Try to choose some outside people. If you'd like to choose one more council person, that's fine. I'll leave that up to you. I'd like to put Chris Bowers on it, since he is our representative here from for Pickens County here in the Easley area, our police chief, our fire chief, and our city administrator.
Okay.
And I really, it would not hurt if we put one more business person out in the community on it that
Okay.
would be your choice.
All righty.
And like I say, y'all would just need to meet and try to have something for us to bring forth to the council before July the 13th.
Yes, sir. Hope everybody's home from vacation. Please, I would appreciate the help.
Mayor, while back
Yes,
reading
yes, sir.
some of the minutes from staff meeting, there was discussion about parking in Easley, downtown Easley, and I'm starting to hear things myself about concerns among the business people about parking, and look forward to hearing more
Trying
about
to
it.
have a resolution.
No, sir, you know, it is an issue, and it's going to become even more so.
Are those minutes that you read, is that beneficial?
Yes, sir. That's a good idea.
I was just gonna add on that, we have had some discussion about, we're gonna be repainting stripes downtown for the parking spaces, and Public Works is looking at doing some labeling on the road within the parking spaces to do some time parking. So we're looking at that. We don't wanna put up 50 signs again through downtown, so we're trying to look at some ways that are less sign intensive and more actually within the parking space, and we may color code as well to help identify which ones are temporary versus, 2 hour versus 30 minutes or something like that. So we're working on that right now.
Is there any kind of rule, regulation, law in place about parking limits, 2 hours, 30 minutes, or anything on the books?
There is a standing ordinance of 2-hour parking. However, the city chose to take the signs down a little over a year and a half ago.
When we opened the downtown section of the Doodle Trail, we took them out of the parking lots, given the fact that it takes 2 hours to ride a bike back and forth from Pickens, that we hated to ticket people that were parking downtown to use the trail that are also gonna be visiting our downtown businesses as well.
And then you get into enforcement.
Let's quit running and we'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Enjoy yourself.